So we learned a lot about the skeletal system and what it does in lab. We basically learned parts and where they're located and how some of them got their names. But with this chapter, what we're going to do is what's the function of the skeleton and how does it build itself up and tear itself down when it needs to. And then, of course, you know, hopefully you realize that when you were a baby, you were born with this tiny skeleton and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. How did that happen? How did some bones that started out as cartilage become bones? And we're going to discuss all that. The skeleton is basically designed to do a couple of things. Support makes sense. It holds up the body. We know that we have an endoskeleton. An exoskeleton is what insects have, that outer shell. The endoskeleton is an internal skeleton. It allows us to hang muscle off of it. That's why we could be so much bigger than, let's say, an insect that could be maybe the size of your hand. It's designed so we can hang heavy amounts of muscle on it. And if you think about a whale or an elephant, they can hang a lot of muscle on this same sort of structure. Designed differently, of course, but they can hang a lot of muscle off of it. Protection. If you look at all of the encasements around the skull and even the central nervous system, it's really designed to protect certain vital organs. The skull is designed perfectly so we can let just some nerve endings leave from, let's say, our brain to go to our nose or to our mouth or our eyes, but it really is designed to encase the brain. And then, of course, we have ribs to protect the heart and the lungs and our spine for our spinal cord. Movements, they provide leverage for muscles. They have a bank of calcium and phosphates that they can either get when they need them, when they're on low supplies, or when they're in abundance, they can actually just go ahead and store them away. Blood actually gets made in the cavities of bones. We make our red blood cells and our white blood cells, and we even have some fat that gets stored there as energy storage. We call that yellow bone marrow. There's different types of bones that we're going to actually cover, and the types of connective tissue and what sort of holds them together. But what we're really going to discuss is what it surrounds the bone, how does the bone mineralize itself, and what kind of cells support bone structure and destruction, which is sort of weird to think about. Why would you want to destroy your bones? But we'll talk about that. The bone is definitely a dynamic living tissue that consists of remodeling itself all the time. It fixes itself after the day-to-day wear and tear that you get on your skeletal system. Your skeleton system basically overhauls itself every 7 years. So what you have today, 7 years from now, is going to be a completely brand new skeletal system. And it's just because we're constantly repairing and remodeling. And that's from your skull all the way down to your toes. And then bones contain other tissues as well. Of course, we know that they have blood vessels and marrow, which is going to be the red bone marrow and the yellow bone marrow, cartilage, nerve tissues, fibrous connective tissues, and they all help to support bones. So let's start out with fibrous connective tissue and what that is. There's two really fibrous connective tissues that we're going to talk about, periosteum. And remember, peri is something that's always going to be outside, and osteum is bone. So outside bone, periosteum, covers the external surface of the bone, except for some joints. They connect to a specific type of matrix called the Sharpley fibers. And if you look in this picture over here, this would be the periosteum, and this sort of webbing fiber that actually does attach to the bone, that is the Sharpley fibers. And then, of course, endo means inside, and osteum is still bone, so this is going to be the endosteum. It lines the internal surface of the bone, and this is where we're going to actually store a lot of fat and energy and things like that. We're going to have blood being made in this area, so we have a coating on the outside of the bone and a coating on the inside of the bone. And we have different cells that help the bone itself. We have stem cells. They're going to actually make some of the bone, especially early on, and it still continues even to this day when you get older. We have osteo. Keep in mind, osteo means bone, and blast means something that's going to build something up. So osteoblasts are going to be something that makes bones, and they're going to build it up to become bigger. We have osteocytes. Osteocytes are mature bone cells, and they're basically going to monitor and maintain the mineralization of bone. And then last one is going to be osteoclast. An osteoclast is basically going to be something that breaks down bone. And you'll notice that all of these have one nuclei, all the parts of the cell that we know about, except for this one. This one has a bunch of nuclei, a bunch of independent things in there, so they can break themselves down and become more. And we're going to talk about why you break cells down. And clast means to destroy or break down, and blast means to build up. So when we look at these cells, we're going to notice that there's going to be a lot of mitotic activity, which means that they're going to regenerate themselves quite a bit. And that's going to be the stem cells that give rise to that. They're going to give rise to other bone cells. They're found in the layer between the periosteum and the endosteum, and that's just going to be where they're going to hang out and rebuild bone cells. The osteoblast, blast means forming. So these are going to be things that are going to make bone cells. They secrete collagen. Remember how collagen is a network that other cells can hang on? And that's what this is going to do. They secrete collagen and calcium binding proteins. So these both make a lot of sense. If you're going to make bones, the thing that I would totally need to have is calcium binding proteins, so we can take calcium from the blood, and collagen, so we can sort of attach the calcium to the collagen to strap it into cells. They form and help mineralize organic materials of the matrix. They're found under, again, the endosteum and the periosteum, so of course a lot of these things are going to be in that zone. Osteocytes. Osteocytes are going to be these specialized cells that encase the matrix is formed. Their function is to just basically monitor bone stress and activity. So it monitors bones activity and absorbs or deposits material. It senses pressure in the bone and sort of sends out signals if there needs to be some repair. Areas of the bone, I'm going to show you a better picture of these guys in a second, but we have these lacuna cavities that are osteocyte residues, and basically there's these little tiny sort of circles inside the bone, and these sort of circles or chambers make it so bone can be flexible and be really strong. And if you've ever seen like a cross section of better yet, the San Francisco Bridge has all these cables. They have a bunch of these cables that hold and suspend that bridge. They don't do one cable, they have a bunch, and it's to give it strength. And that's what these lacunas are kind of like. And then we have these canaliculi, which are these connective areas, and they allow osteocytes to communicate with each other. And they have these ability to communicate one to another, basically to go ahead and say, are you remodeling? We're going to remodel too. Or is there any damage in your area? We need to either get rid of calcium or build calcium. Osteoclasts. Remember, class means to break things down. So this is going to be breaking down bone. We need calcium and phosphorus all the time for muscle movement and a few other things that we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. So this is where we're going to get that material. So enzymes are secreted off this ruffle border, and it's going to help remodel bones, so it's going to break bone down. Sometimes even if you break your bones, you break them a little bit every day when you go up and down stairs. These guys will sort of clean up those sort of cuts and fractures so we can rebuild them better. But we're always going to be breaking down bone or building it up. And then, of course, what is bone made of? It's made of these extracellular matrices. They osteoid, which is organic material. It's secreted by osteoblasts, and it's basically just collagen fiber and a ground substance that goes in between the material. And then we have a lot of inorganic material, which makes a lot more sense. These are going to be like calcium and minerals like sulfate and potassium and magnesium. And then, of course, we pack them around collagen fibers for that process.